Soon put you to rights. Oh, that shouldn't have happened.
What are you doing?
Something I should have done a long time ago. Repair the chameleon circuit.
What?
The TARDIS, when working properly, is capable of many amazing things. Not unlike myself. One of its functions is that it can change shape to blend perfectly with its surrounding environment.
I see.
Not yet, you don't. I wonder why I didn't do it before.
Look, Doctor, do you really think you're up to this? I mean, you've only recently regenerated, and yet you've undertaken so much work. Well, what I really mean to say is you still seem a little unstable.
Unstable? 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 This is me, Peri. At this very moment, I am as stable as you will ever see me.
Oh, dear.
You must forget how I used to be. I'm a Time Lord. A man of science, temperament, and passion.
And a very loud voice.
Yes, that too. But not unstable. This is the real me, Peri. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I promise.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always...
Hello, I'm Scott.
Hello, Scott. This week we are looking at our first ever 6th Doctor adventure. It's an interesting one with Attack of the Cybermen. Probably the weakest Cybermen we've ever seen, but we'll get into that.
Oh, yeah.
This episode first aired on the 5th of January 1985, which was a Saturday, and at the time of recording, 37 years, 5 months, and 21 days ago. A long time. On this day, the current United States President was Ronald Reagan, and the UK Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher, and everybody was just kind of sad all the time about the world leaders. And I'm sure it got better, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. As we're speaking right now on the 26th of June, 2022, things are certainly looking better.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting part of Doctor Who history actually came out. I don't know if it was on this same day, but it was definitely this same year, possibly this same month. And do you know about this piece of Doctor Who history before I mention it? It's a very, very niche piece of Doctor Who history I had never even heard about.
Was somebody born?
No. Doctor Who and the Warlord came out. And if you don't know what Doctor Who and the Warlord is, this is a text adventure Doctor Who game that you can still play in your web browser. And so of course I went ahead and played it to see how it went, and I drowned in a swamp within 60 seconds of playing the game, so it's a solid 10 out of 10. But yeah, you can play it. It's in like a BBC archive somewhere. Just search up Doctor Who and the Warlord and you can play this text adventure.
I am sure like all the options are very limited. Like if you're stuck in a room with no windows, you have to be like, oh yeah, I have to search for this exact phrase.
Well, it was like, you know, there's this, you hear fighting in the distance, the Doctor's nowhere to be seen, you've got a radio on you, and I went, use radio, and it went, it's not turned on, so I went, okay, turn on radio. It's like, you turn on the radio, okay, use the radio, there's nobody on the other side, okay, cool, and then I was like, I head south, and it was like, you head south, it starts to get misty. I was like, I keep heading south. It was like, you head south, you fall into like the swamp. I was like, leave swamp. I was like, you drown, the end.
Yeah, that's how all the text adventures games goes. It's bullshit.
But
I've
hey,
never played one, but it's bullshit.
It out of every Doctor Who video game I've ever played, it is probably the best one. Because Doctor Who does not have good video games.
Better than Top Trumps?
Well, the Top Trumps one's less of a video game and more of just the card game in digital form. Yeah. I mean, it was a working game, though, wasn't it? It was a working game. So it's got that above whatever the one is that's really badly broken that we both own.
Yeah, the Edge of Time.
Edge of Time,
Reality.
yeah. Although the Weeping Angel mobile game they came out with is alright. It's a fun way to kill like 2 hours.
I don't believe you.
I played it and I beat it, and it was not hard or scary. That's literally, there was nothing interesting that happened on this day. But if we turn our mind back to history and look at all the 5th of Januaries that there ever were, in 1886, as we all know, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson is published by Longmans, Green and Co. So, very, very famous book gets published on this day in the 1800s. Have you read it? Did you have to read it?
Haven't.
Really? I had to read it for English class. We read through it for our English one year when I was in secondary school. It's fine. It's pretty good.
Like, I know enough about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde through pop culture, but I haven't read the book or watched a movie based on it. The only media I've actually seen adapted was the Arthur TV show. We did a musical segment about Jekyll and Hyde. I think we've talked about it on the show before.
Probably. Sounds interesting.
I've sent you a music video before, and it goes Jekyll, Hyde,
yes.
Jekyll, Hyde,
yes,
Hyde,
yes,
Jekyll.
yes. I remember us
Classic.
talking about this. That was one of their very early episodes. If I'm to remember correctly. But yes, very famous book came out on this day in 1896. Die Presse or Die Presse, it's German, so it would be Die Presse, newspaper in Germany, publicly announces that Wilhelm Röntgen's discovery of X-rays and their potential for new methods of medical diagnosis in a front-page article. So X-rays get announced to the general public in Germany in 1896 on the 5th of January, and I just thought that was pretty nifty. Then nothing happens for almost a century as we jump forward to 1959, and something extremely important happens for a very specific group of people that go on to make a very iconic thing, and that is Bozo the Clown, a live children's show, premieres on TV. And Bozo the Clown, of course, the inspiration for Krusty the Clown in The Simpsons.
Okay, well, that's where we go kind of like weirdly out of... So, there's apparently Rusty the Clown, or Rusty Nails, is the inspiration for Krusty the Clown, which is like a local clown that Matt Groening used to watch as a kid.
Who's Matt Groening? It's Matt Groening. You fake fan. Interesting, because the common consensus is it was I'm sure it's Bozo for some writers, and for Matt Groening specifically, it's this one clown nobody's heard of. Like... Interesting. But in 1968, Dr. Benjamin Spock is indicted for conspiring to violate draft law. He was some pediatrician. That's why I included it. I've never seen a real human being with the last name Spock before. This guy's name was literally Dr. Spock. Like,
when was this, sorry?
1968. I think Star Trek was 69. So
Imagine when he was getting into trouble, the people giving him into trouble was like, "Oh yeah, your name is Mr. Spock."
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
And then if we flash forward to 1972, President Nixon signs a bill for NASA to begin research on a manned space shuttle, which I thought was pretty neat. Very space is cool. But that's literally all that happened on the 5th of January. We need to liven it up because nothing else interesting happened for, like, what, 45 years? Like, more than that. Like,
January tends to be a very sleepy month, Nothing happens. Everybody's coming back from Christmas holidays.
50 years. 50 years exactly, nothing interesting has happened.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, stuff has happened, obviously, but most of it was just depressing. Nothing that made me go, But yeah, that's what happened on the 5th of January. Shall we jump into the writing background for Attack of the Cybermen?
Oh, yeah. In the 60s, the Cybermen were massive, Between 1966 and 1968, they had 5 stories. The 10th Planet, Moonbase, Tomb of the Cybermen, which we watched and very much enjoyed. The Wheel in Space, and also The Invasion. And then suddenly, there was no Cybermen stories for like 7 years. It returned with Revenge of the Cybermen in 1975. Everyone thought that story was shit. 7 years later, there was another Cyberman story called Earthshock, which was beloved. It's still considered to be one of the best stories ever. And of course, in 1985, Attack of the Cybermen came out, and it's we'll talk about it.
Yeah. It's certainly an episode of Doctor Who that I have seen.
But yeah, as we know, Cybermen were basically used to try and capitalized on Doctor Who again because the Daleks were not being used because Terry Nation wanted to bring it over to America, and that didn't go well, so they got the Daleks back, and the Cybermen were pretty much forgotten about for most of the 70s and the 80s. But yeah, Earthshock was a huge success for the show, and it was thought that another Cyberman story was a fantastic idea. In 1984, Jerry Davis, who was the original one of the creators of the Cybermen, we've discussed in Tomb of the Cybermen, which was last year. He was splitting time between London and California, and he paid John Nathan Turner and Eric Sayward a visit with a new Cyberman idea. And the episode was to be called Genesis of the Cybermen, which obviously it kind of riffing off of Genesis of the Daleks, which was also a huge story.
Or Terminator Genesis, which obviously he foresaw being a huge success.
Yeah, he foresaw that one of the Doctors was going to be in that movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, the episode he pitched was eventually rejected as the series had changed since Jerry had worked on Doctor Who in 1974. Basically, from what I understand from the story, is it just had Cybermen standing around and talking. That's the only description I know of the story.
Well, instead they just stand around and get shot in this one.
So yeah, the producers wanted to focus on bringing new writers to this story, and Jerry Davis was eventually disappointed to learn that the episode had been made without him. I imagine that would have been quite heartbreaking to get rejected like that when it's your creation.
Yeah. Although he won't be the first nor the last person to experience it.
So yeah, the writer for this episode is credited to Paula Moore, and there's a lot of misconception about this episode because Paula Moore doesn't actually kind of exist. It's an alias for Paula Woolsey, which is the girlfriend of script editor Eric Sayward, and Paula Woolsey never wrote this episode. It was a fake out, my dude.
What a conspiracy! What a conspiracy this is.
So the conception of whoever wrote this episode is kind of like muddled around a little bit. Ian Levine claims he wrote this episode, but he only provided a script story outline. Whereas, so Ian Levine was a continuity advisor on the show at the time, and he was like a huge fan of the show, and he would later do stuff like the theme song for K9 and Company, which we love.
K9.
It's the best part of that show.
It is the best part of that show. That and the soil.
And like a few months after this episode aired, he would write a little music number called Doctor in Distress.
This is a man of great impact on culture.
We talked about him a bunch in K9 and Company if you want to go back to that episode. But yeah, this episode was actually written by Eric Sayward, and he changed the name of the writing credits to just avoid problems with the writing guild, because at the time script editors on TV shows weren't allowed to actually write the TV shows themselves. So later on this season, there's an episode called one of the Dalek stories later this season. He wrote, and his name is on it, but that's because he wrote it between a 6-week holiday. So he got around.
So many
hoops. He
hoops.
wasn't
So many
working
hoops
on the show.
Yeah, so many hoops to jump through.
So yeah, Ian Levine was keen on making a sequel to Tomb of the Cybermen, pitching the idea of Cybermen setting traps to lure the Doctor to the ice tombs of Telos, using a distress signal from Earth, and then revive for hibernation as the TARDIS arrived. They would then use the TARDIS to travel back in time and prevent Mondas from being destroyed, as seen in the 10th Planet, which we're covering later this year. So yeah, this is like a sequel to Tomb of the Cybermen with references to the invasion, and also it's a prequel to the 10th Planet. It's muddled. And also, most of these episodes didn't exist at the time. It was thought to be wiped out completely, so nobody in the general viewing audience knew what these stories were.
Huh.
And then Sayward decided to add elements like the Cryons. They brought back Lytonn from Resurrection for the Daleks, which I just looked up. That episode, we covered that episode, and it came out exactly a year ago. In July of last year.
What a coincidence.
Insane.
Now, who was Lytonn?
Lytonn was the mercenary working with the Daleks, if you remember that. He was one of the policemen shooting the people at the very beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, you have no memory of Lytonn, do you?
I remember the policemen shooting people, but I don't think I could pick him out of a crowd.
Yeah, he's the main mercenary that tried to free Davros, and he survived at the end of the story.
Okay.
Any recollection of that episode of the?
I remember the
20
Davros
storyline?
stuff, and I remember the Dalek stuff, but the human stuff, it's like vague shapes.
Big shapes. How old are you? 5?
I think I'm 6 next week.
So yeah, at this stage, the story was referred to as the Cold War, which kind of would have been a better title because you spend half of this episode not knowing the Cybermen are behind the attacks.
Yeah, it's kind of
And
like
so,
when they show up, it's like, yeah, I knew they were coming. Like,
yeah, you know what's coming from the very first second, whereas if this episode was called anything else, you'd be like, holy shit, the Cybermen are back.
yeah.
So yeah, the director of this episode is Mathew Robinson, who also directed Resurrection of the Daleks. This is very much a Resurrection of the Daleks sequel right here. And this is also one of the rare episodes to be 45 minutes. This whole season is 45 minutes, in fact. It's the only season in Classic Who to be 45 minutes. And this is because the Resurrection of the Daleks from the year before was broadcast as 45-minute episodes, if you remember being surprised by that. It's because back in the Peter Davison era, episodes were aired twice a week, but the Winter Olympics was aired at the same time. So in order to free time on the time slot, they decided to merge 2 episodes together, and that made 45 minutes. So it wasn't meant to be 45 minutes, but it became 45 minutes, and it became a success because it was the highest viewing average of season 21, and we decided, oh yeah, we're going to put Doctor Who back on its Saturday night slot, 45 minutes, this is going to be a huge rating success. Episode 1 got 8.9 million, which is massive for a show. It's like one of the best performing episodes for a while. But then it kind of slipped back to 7.2 million the week later. 2 million people dropped off, and they kind of just stuck around the average for most of it of the last season, so it wasn't that much of a success. And also, at the time, the competition on ITV was the A-Team, so of course, I think most people would have been watching A-Team. That's a huge success as well.
Yeah. Although Doctor Who won in the end, didn't it? Doctor Who's come back to be as successful, if not more, than it was before. Whereas the A-Team got one mediocre movie, like 10 years ago.
I want to see that movie. It's terrible.
I've seen it. I saw it when I was a kid, and I've not seen it since.
Yeah, you know when teachers are just deciding not to teach you one day and we just put on the movie?
It's my favorite.
My English teacher put on that movie and it was shit.
Interesting.
I don't know why she put it on.
There was an English teacher at my school who was famous for whenever he was putting a movie on, it would be Jaws. Like that was just the film he always put on, regardless of like what year of school you were in. Like you could be S1 or S6, regardless of when in the year it was. If it was movie time, it was Jaws. Like
were there any kids absolutely terrified by that movie, or
no? It's pretty dated.
Yeah,
like
I imagine if we show that to a primary 1 student, they'd be terrified.
Yeah, but like he's a secondary school teacher.
Yeah.
Like.
But yeah, that's all the notes for this episode.
Interesting. So, with that being said, are you ready to attack some Cybermen like everybody else does? They're not really a threat, don't worry about it.
I'm not ready.
Oh man, well, we're going anyway.
Who are you?
I've already told you. I am known as the Doctor. I'm also a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Castorberus.
You're bonkers.
That's debatable. But I'm also telling the truth. The question is, are you?
Yes.
And what are you doing down here?
Robbing a diamond merchant's.
Thought the police were supposed to uphold the law.
Oh, they do. Most of the time.
You're beginning to annoy me.
Look, the truth wouldn't make much sense to you.
Try me. I've had enough of this. Shoot him, Peri.
For real?
Yeah, shoot him.
You murder a police officer, you get 30 years!
Handful of heartbeats to a Time Lord.
Oh, well, please tell him what he wants to know. I'm sure it can't be that important.
I'm here to observe the activities of a white male suspect known as Lytonn.
Lytonn. Tall, lean, dark, well-spoken, the sort of man who might shoot his mother just to keep his trigger finger supple.
Somewhat colourful description, but it could be him.
Commander Lytonn. Late of the Dalek Task Force.
Dalek?
I should have guessed when we were attacked by those uniformed policemen. Well, how'd you get onto him?
Huh? Oh, there was a raid on an electronics firm. Some rather specialized stuff was removed.
I think we know where it went.
Oh, will you be pleased to hear there's a reward?
Just get on with your story.
Well, there was a whisper on the street that the job was down to Lytonn. Only we'd never heard of him.
Just as if he'd come from another planet.
Yes, he might have. When we checked, there was no record of his birth, school, driving license, tax, nothing. Under normal circumstances, we'd have just picked him up.
But you were curious. You wanted to know more about him. An act we may all live to regret. Not only is he from another planet, but he's also a professional killer.
So the episode just opens up with the intro, as every Classic Who episode does, and since this is our first time seeing the Sixth Doctor, Scott, what do you think about his intro, his theme song, the graphics?
I mean, we pretty much talked about this when we did Resurrection of the Daleks. It's the same intro with the, Colin Baker's face just slapped onto it.
It's really, I thought it was so boring. I was like, this is such a boring intro to do. Yeah, no, it's really short. There's no vortex. You don't see the TARDIS. You just see his face and then some cool, colorful lights. I like that part. But
I like
yeah,
it.
I really don't. I think this is it just feels bland. This just feels like a bland intro. It's just fine. Like it's like a 7 out of 10. It's not even that. It's like a 5 out of 10. It's like banging. This is the bare minimum I would expect from a Doctor Who intro.
I love it when his face appears and there's a whole strobe of lights.
Yeah, that bit's cool. But then
amazing.
nothing else happens. Like that's the whole intro. Is just that. Like it's, you know.
Short and sweet, my dude.
No,
Short and
it's
sweet.
just short. And
also,
the theme song feels weirdly muted. Do you not think it like everything feels muffled?
You feel muffled.
That's really good commentary.
No, I don't think it does. I like it.
No, I think it's dreadful.
It's not my favorite theme, but compared to the Seventh Doctor's intro, where it's all those CGI comics,
At least they were trying to do something visually interesting, you know, and experiment and push the boundaries. This is safe and boring.
it is what it is.
Safe and boring.
That's what you are. That's what we called you in high school.
No, I didn't go to high school. I went to academy.
But yeah, another thing I forgot to mention is this is Colin Baker's start of his first season, but it's his second story. That's because at the end of last season, we decided to just throw in a Colin Baker story for no reason, and that story wasn't received very well at all. So people didn't like Colin Baker. He was too erratic. He was too moody. His mood swings were all over the place. And we had to wait 9 months to watch him again, which I imagine would have been like, oh, that awful Doctor we just saw. I don't want to watch that.
That guy we didn't like playing the Doctor. Which to be fair to Colin Baker, I think he does a really good job as the Doctor. It's the writing that's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I love him as the Doctor. He's very good in this episode. Yeah, I think his version of the Doctor comes off. I like the darker side to the Doctor, but I think it's a bit too dark. I think you need to have a bit more levity into it, because the Twin Dilemma, his first episode, he starts strangling Peri. Like, he tries to kill her at multiple times.
Yeah, which is funny in this one where she's like, I'm really scared of you, Doctor. And he's like, nah, don't be. It's okay. Ha ha ha. Like, but yeah, I know nothing about Peri as a companion anyway. I found her very annoying, but we'll get into her when she actually shows up.
All you really need to know is she's American and she has big boobs. That's all the show really wants you to know. Especially in this episode.
Yeah. So our episode begins with some guys crawling around. I say crawling, they're just kind of dawdling around in a dark sewer. Foreshadowing for what this episode is the sewer. Poop goes there, like the episode is, because it's not good. It's not a good episode. Well, it's fine, but you know, these guys are talking and walking, doing some sort of job, and then they're like, "Hey, this wall shouldn't be here. Why is this wall here?" One guy goes off to look. He's like, "Maybe we're in the wrong tunnel," and he's like, "Nah, we're definitely in the right tunnel." Then he gets killed by a video game. As the you know, it's the Cyberman and it's from the Cyberman's POV, but it's the most interesting POV of a Cyberman I've ever seen.
Oh yeah. Speaking of the Cyberman and POV, this episode was supposed to open up on shots of Cybermen looking at rats scuttling around, but we got the rats on screen, and the rats didn't do what they wanted them to do. They're like, oh, fuck this, rats are shite to work with. And they gave up.
Amazing. They did
never work with animals.
Yeah, that is what never work with children or animals. That's the 2 rules, isn't it? That's pretty great.
We're gonna see the sewer set quite a bit. It looks like a decent sewer set.
Yeah.
You know, it looks movie quality, and the lighting. Actually, the director thought to get the lighting this dark, and it looks very moody and dramatic. Although later on he has to adjust it slightly because Colin Baker's coat was a huge nightmare to deal with because it was so bright.
My favorite thing about it is it's because this is shot in the 80s, it's shot on tape, and it's on really old cameras. Whenever the torch shines into the lens, it burns the tape, and you get this drag mark of light. Which is always, it's so distracting to me. I like my eyes fixate on it whenever it comes up, but it's nothing you can do about it at that time unless you're getting like a way bigger budget.
I'm pretty sure they kind of fixed that on the season 22 Blu-ray, which just came out because obviously that episode is on there, and it looks pretty decent on Blu-ray.
That's pretty cool.
Get the Blu-ray, folks. It's great.
I would, but it also money. It costs a lot of money. As great as it does look. But we then cut to the Doctor fiddling around with one of the circular things that are on the TARDIS walls. And he's kind of bumbling about. He gets electrocuted at one point, and he's muttering to himself as he does. And then we get introduced to Peri, who is the companion in a tight shirt. Which is like her 2 traits, as you were saying before. She's American and wears tight clothing.
It goes back to what we were saying in Resurrection of the Daleks with Tegan and her mini skirts. Basically, she's wearing clothes for the dads, which was what was said behind the scenes, which is quite yucky.
Yeah, it's pretty yuck. It doesn't look comfortable, and she's wearing heels the entire time as well, and they make her run for the dads. And there's a scene coming up later on where she has to go full sprint down an alleyway, and I was like, you're making her run full sprint in heels, and you can see she's really struggling to not fall on her face. Like,
and also later on in exterior scenes, she is cold as shit.
Yeah.
Which I don't envy her. And also Colin Baker is hot as shit because his coat. Wow. What do you think of his coat? This is the first time
I was about to say I was going to talk about his outfit. I adore it. I think it is brilliant. I absolutely love his outfit.
So do I. I think it's especially the cat in his collar.
Yeah,
it's a pin of a cat. It's great.
I think it's great. The coat is very Joseph in his Technicolor dream coat, but it fits the Doctor really well. The stripes.
It reminds me of what Elizabeth Sladen said about her outfit in her final episode, The Hand of Fear. Basically, when you've traveled around the world and different time periods and across space, you eventually go insane, and that reflects in your outfit.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I love how the trousers pattern matches the cuff pattern off the jacket, like it's the same fabric. It's such a distracting outfit because it's so loud and there's so much going on in it, but you can study every little corner is different.
But you know what? That reflects his personality. The Sixth Doctor is loud. He is distracting.
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant outfit, but we find out.
And compared to the Fifth Doctor's outfit, he was basically a man in a coat with celery.
Yeah, celery was the one quirky bit, but other than that, he was dressed to play cricket. Like he was in a cricket costume with celery.
And Colin Baker's expressed disappointment in this outfit because he wanted something that's more similar to what Christopher Eccleston eventually wore. But
the leather jacket, yeah.
Yeah, in hindsight, I like this outfit. Man.
I do like this outfit. I do think the leather jacket would match his Doctor because this is the grungy, angry Doctor, whereas his outfit is very loud and playful. Where he is not he's loud, but he's not a playful Doctor. He has no patience for Peri in any single moment of this episode. He is constantly putting her down and shutting her, telling her to just scoffing at her questions,
And yeah, speaking of the Doctor's personality, this was Colin's idea to give the Doctor so many mood swings and to be spiky to Peri and have an ego. And Colin Baker eventually wanted the Doctor to soften over time. He was expecting a long run in the role, but after the next season, he'd be gone. He'd be fired because bullshit.
BBC, because BBC producers getting
bullshit.
cold feet. Yeah, because he could have led to a really, really cool character arc for the Doctor, which you don't often see in classic Who, the Doctor changing, do you? He just kind of saves the day. I think it would have been very interesting. And, you know, with the last name Baker, he had an obligation to be in the role for a long time. Like, you know.
But yeah, poor old Colin Baker, man. 2 seasons. That's...
Yeah, it's the shortest running Doctor season-wise. I don't know about episode-wise, but definitely season-wise.
Definitely.
Although, of course, his adventures continued with Big Finish and still are.
Yeah. But, you know, his next season would have the same number of episodes, but each episode would be 25 minutes. So his last season got cut in half.
Yikes.
Which was, really depressing.
What a poor time. But hey, at least his relationship with Doctor Who never wavered. You know, he still played the Doctor. He still came back to the role after all these years and stuff like that. But right now, the Doctor is fiddling with circuitry within the TARDIS because he is trying to correct the chameleon circuit. And he's like, I don't know why I didn't try to fix it before. As he's going
only
on.
took him 22 seasons.
I know. As he's going around fixing it, and at this point, Peri's like, or Peri, whatever her name is, Peri. She's like, hey, she's like, you're acting really weird, Doctor. You're erratic, and it goes on this great monologue with the Doctor where he's like, erratic, like just getting louder and louder, and giving a speech where he's like, I'm not the same man I was. I'm a different man. You know, I've regenerated. You're going to have to accept who I am now. This is what I'm like. You know, it's a classic first Doctor new regeneration type speech, but I think Colin Baker's delivery through it is very, very good.
Except here, I just really love that his regeneration madness still lingers on for this entire season. He is still, as I said, mood swings all over the place, man.
It's like something went wrong halfway through the regeneration. It's very good. And in the meantime, we cut to very 1980s looking. Is it London, I presume? Where it is? Yeah, it's the most modern looking I've seen classic Who, which was weird for me because remember when we covered the Seventh Doctor was set in World War II, so everything still looked pretty old. Whereas this is people are driving around in 1980s modern. I was like, oh my god, I'm not used to seeing everything's like alive. Like
that's my favorite thing about classic Who, when we get to see modern society, just how it works.
See it how it develops. Yeah.
It's just so much fun to just watch this old footage of just them walking around regular streets and all that.
Yes.
But we have our old friend Lytonn driving a car, and do you recognize the person next to him?
Next to Lytonn? Russell. No, I don't. I could recognize Lytonn once you point him out, but I do not recognize Russell at all.
We've seen him before in the show. He plays Davros.
Does he really?
Yes.
He's looking good without the makeup. Did he play Davros in the Daleks? Oh, okay.
The one we just covered.
Well,
last year.
They do not give him a lot to do in this episode compared to what they did in the Daleks, because he is absolutely amazing in the Dalek episode, whereas here he does like nothing.
But here he was happy to take on the role because he's friends with the director, and the director decided to cast him again here, basically saying, "Oh yeah, as a favor to you, Terry, we don't have to wear any makeup because last time he was
drowning.
He
like
was drowning
drenched.
in sweat.
Yeah.
So yes, he was very happy to be here, as himself.
Wow, very good actor. Underused in this episode, but probably happy to be there. Very, very good actor. But we cut to these guys sitting in a car with Lytonn driving, Davros, but not Davros beside him, and 2 thugs in the back. And they're basically like, hey, we're going to rob a bank. Yes, we are going to rob a bank, and we're going to do it today. Surprise. And they're like, oh boy, we're going to have to get explosives and get ready for it. And he's like, Lytton's like, yeah, well, get it done. Otherwise, I'm going to kill you.
Yes, we're going to rob a bank that's actually a film company office.
But they're going to rob it for diamonds. Specifically, they're after diamonds, which is such an interesting thing to rob because how are you going to get rid of them afterwards? We then cut back to the Doctor, and he's like, I'm going to take you somewhere nice, Peri. Where'd you want to go? And then Peri's about to answer, and he's like, oh, you probably want to go somewhere green and lovely. Yeah, we'll go there. And Peri's like, okay. Like, just completely... Why is she hanging around with him? Is it, like, out of obligation because she saw him regenerate? Like...
God, I don't know at this point. It's like... Yeah, Peri, just get out of here. It's like an abusive relationship.
Like, he does not like Peri at all. Like, clearly does not care about her opinion, anything she has to say, and is only putting up with her because she was there before, you know? Whereas Peri's there for, I don't know why.
Although, in Caves of Androzani, which was her first episode, the Doctor saved her life by taking the poison. So
Yeah, I suppose, but still, the Doctor's not nice to her. And there's this great bit where the Doctor reveals that he was going to take them. Something goes wrong with the TARDIS, and it like falls over, and then everything starts getting weirdly distorted and shouty. And they end up. Did we cut away at that point? I think we cut away back to.
Well,
Earth.
we did, yeah. I was in the past.
Yeah.
We just passed that point.
Yeah, and then so after they fix it, and the Doctor's like, I don't know why that happened, probably because I was messing around the chameleon circuit, whoops. And he's like, I was going to take you to Earth, by the way, in 1984, and Peri's like, that's the most boring place you could have chosen to take me. And he's like, well, you could be a little bit more grateful. And he's got this great line where he goes, a little gratitude wouldn't irrevocably damage my ego. He's so aggressive to Peri, but there's a good few lines. Each of them, Peri's got a few good comebacks to him as well. Like,
yeah, as always, the actors have great chemistry. I say this between every Doctor and every companion. They work great. It's just the script that's lacking in most places.
Yeah. Where they just get nothing to do. Even a problem that consists up to today.
No, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
He learned how to ride a bike, maybe. We cut back to the humans, and they're in like a shed, and he's like, hey boys, we're gonna climb through the sewers, and everyone's really down for it. They're like, awesome. Nobody once goes like, that's gonna stink and we're gonna smell, and then everyone's gonna know that we robbed the diamonds because we're gonna smell like sewage. You're not worried about that part, and nobody's worried about that. There's this great line where Lytton's like, we're going through the sewers because I don't want to go in guns blazing with nylon on my head, and one of the thugs says to the other thug, he's like, oh yeah, it's because he's allergic to nylon, gesturing towards the thug, and the thug's like, no I'm not, shut up. It's this weird little bit of banter that never really comes back again, but like,
and it comes back, but yeah, there's a point where one of them's like, oh yeah, the SAS are probably going to be called in.
Mm-hmm.
Like a week after they started pre-production, a policewoman was machine gunned in London outside the Libyan embassy.
Oh wow.
And this was a line in response to that, so yeah.
Interesting choice to make, and Doctor Who, I don't know why they thought they would need to comment on it.
Because it's very relevant, and the SAS was called into that incident.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they would be, because how many gun violence do we ever have in the UK? That's something I actually, when Lytton does bring out the gun, all of the thugs are like, oh, hey, why are we bringing out a gun? Let's rob this bank with no guns. I'm not comfortable. I'm a hardened criminal. I am not comfortable around guns, which is the most British way of robbing anything ever. It's brilliant. But we cut back to the TARDIS, and the Doctor's like, hey, look outside. There's a white dot, which is supposed to pass as Halley's Comet, or Halley's Comet, if you're watching this episode. And it is just the most boring interpretation of a comet I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, yeah, but it's 1985, and they don't have budget to show off. So it's fine for what it is.
You understand it's a comet, but
yeah, Halley's Comet, of course, returns to Earth's orbit every 75 years. It came in 1986 and will return in 2061.
Oh, cool. We'll be old guys looking up at a comet. And for whatever reason, Peri suggests that Halley's Comet is always associated with impending disaster. And that's not something I was familiar with in the folklore of Halley. Surely it would be, oh, cool, look, this comet thing. Not, man, it's back. Yeah.
It's a very odd interpretation for sure.
Yeah, but it's basically just foreshadowing that something bad's going to happen in this episode. And you may notice at this point, we are 10 minutes into the episode and nothing has happened. Whereas if this was a regular episode, this is Classic Who, but if this was a regular 20-minute episode, we would be halfway through and have had like 50 different plot points thrown at once.
Yeah. One of the things that the producers loved about this 45-minute runtime is they could expand things. They could expand things, have more scenes for the Doctor and Peri, do more, but it kind of results in a more slowly paced episodes.
It's interesting. It's slightly slower paced, but I think they utilize their time for the most part better. Like the conversations they're having are interesting, and they're expanding on the character or exploring plot ideas. Whereas even in 20-minute episodes with Classic Who, they were like, I don't know, make them walk. Yeah, they didn't even they were like, we could have a conversation. Nah, just make them walk for 20 minutes. Like this 40 minutes allows them to better pace out the episodes somewhat, but they've really just hit the brakes on the plot until the last 10 minutes. Like, they haven't quite figured out pacing just yet, but the 40-minute standard is so much better.
Yeah, one of the things is the writers didn't have to build 3 cliffhangers out of a story. They could just build one cliffhanger instead, which worked a lot better for the show. And it's kind of a shame they just returned back to a 25-minute runtime next year. Sorry.
Yeah, because the 40-minute one definitely works a lot better, I think. Oh yeah, we go back to the thugs, and they're walking off to go into their secret, shed-based thing, and we see 2 policeman officers step out behind them, and these are policeman officers we have seen before, are they not? Yes.
From Resurrection of the Daleks, the exact same 2 actors, both called Michael.
Oh, interesting.
That's the only reason I remember their name, because they're both called Michael. I don't know their last names.
Their last names is Michaels.
Also, we should mention the music at this point.
Yeah.
It is done by our old friend Malcolm Clark, who also did the Sea Devils. And this is slightly better, but
bad
still.
It's like one song repeated over and over again, regardless of what the scene is. It's the same song that's played over, and he's still doing the thing where the soundtrack is acting like sound effects. There's a moment where the Doctor boops Peri's nose, and then you get a pring noise that, from the music. It's very cartoonish at times. I really don't like this guy's composing at all.
His music that got reused from Earthshock is probably the best parts. It's the best parts of the Cybermen music, but that's only a really good part. The rest is just shit. Yeah.
We cut back to the Doctor in the TARDIS, and they're getting a distress signal, and this is where he really loses patience with Peri, where Peri's asking him a bunch of questions about the distress signal, and he's like, it's an intergalactic, commonly used distress signal. How do you not know this? God damn it. And then he's like, oh, it's coming from Earth, and Peri's like, that's impossible. And he's got this great line where he's like, it's not impossible, Peri. It's just not desirable. Which I think sums up a lot of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Cool. And then we have the gun scene with the criminals, and they're like, look at this big gun. And the guy's like, yeah, it's a big gun. I'm going to use it. And they went, not cool with that, pal. And he's like, shut up. And they're like, fair dues. And then we cut to the TARDIS landing in a junkyard, where we see the chameleon circuit for the first time.
And the music we hear when the TARDIS arrives at the junkyard is Ron Grainer's theme for Steptoe and Son, which is a sitcom about 2 workers in a junkyard.
Oh,
which is a very random choice for a theme, but also the guy Ron Grainer also did the Doctor Who theme song, so I guess it interconnects.
Sure, you can throw it in there. Why not? So the TARDIS appears in a scrapyard, and the Doctor says, this feels familiar. I get it as a reference to the first ever Unearthly Child, where the Doctor lives in a scrapyard with his granddaughter.
No, it's a reference to the last episode because he steps out in trash.
Ah.
Get it?
No, I don't.
Because the last episode is trash, and he's saying the trash looks familiar.
I thought he was talking about this episode. Because this episode's trash.
This episode's better.
Yeah, it's fine. But they step on out, and Peri's like, hey, I thought you said the TARDIS was going to turn into something, that you fixed the chameleon circuit. And the Doctor's like, hey, just thinking about it, just give it a minute. And then the TARDIS turns into a really extravagant looking closet thing. I don't know, how would you describe what it turns into?
In the script, it's an Egyptian pillar, but I'm not sure if that's actually what's on screen.
It doesn't look like an Egyptian. It looks like a closet. It's also covered in flowers, at which Peri kind of laughs at it, and the Doctor's like, hey, well, it's not done it for a long time. Give the TARDIS a break, It'll get better the more it practices.
But yeah, seeing a TARDIS change like that is a fun concept that's not used enough in the next episode.
It's not. They don't utilize the potential for it. You could have the TARDIS turning into all sorts of things, and it creates this ever expanding problem. And maybe it messes up and it becomes like a screwdriver. TARDIS in your pocket, awesome, but how are you going to get into it?
There's a strange reason this subplot is in here. So in Colin's first photo shoot, in costume, John Nathan Turner is asked about asked by press if the TARDIS would ever change, and John Nathan thought about this, he was thinking kids wouldn't understand that police boxes were actually real things, and he decided to educate kids that this is like a chameleon circuit that the TARDIS can change. So this is the whole reason the plot is in here, just to educate kids that police boxes were real things.
Yeah,
and not the TARDIS.
Which I like. I like that exploration of the lore, and that it's, I always love the idea of the chameleon circuit, and it explains why it's a police box that the TARDIS is built into, and all this and all that. It's just they don't do anything fun, really. Well, the one fun thing they do is the piano, and that's it. The
very strange thing about this, I saw this episode for the first time when I was like 8. It's my first Colin Baker episode. And this is like all I remember from the episode with TARDIS changing. I don't remember anything surrounding it.
I remember watching, I don't know what it was some TV talk show documentary thing on either Channel 4 or Comedy Central, where they were talking about old TV shows and moments they remembered, and somebody brought up, they were like, oh, like when they fixed the chameleon circuit in Doctor Who, I remember that, and they showed clips from this off the box thing and the piano and whatever. They didn't talk about the episode in general, they just talked about that one moment where the chameleon circuit. So it's a moment that lasted and left an impact on people. Like, people remembered, like, oh, this is a cool thing that Doctor Who's not done. But you're in season 22 and you're doing something that they've not seen in the show yet, which is pretty cool from that aspect. It's just, it feels like you could do more.
I imagine if they had a bigger budget, they would do more. But basically, the props that TARDIS turns into is just stuff lying around the BBC warehouse.
Yeah, it is
random
just
shit.
Like, as they go walking on, the Doctor kind of just stops in his tracks at one point, and he goes, "I suddenly feel conspicuous," which is just a great sentence. And Peri laughs at him like, "Yeah, because you're wearing a huge rainbow-colored jacket,
like she can speak.
I know.
A very bright pink top with
skin-tight top, like,
and pink cargo shorts.
Yeah. But then she's like, you're kind of, losing your marbles a bit here, Doctor. You've been calling me all sorts of names. And she starts listing off a bunch of previous companion names that we're all supposed to laugh at. Where you're just like, where she's like, you called us, you called me Susan, you called me Tegan, you called me all this, you even called me Jamie, which I was like, you say even called me? Jamie's a boy-girl name. Girls can be called Jamie. This isn't like, you called me. Was there ever a male companion? What was the name of the one that exploded?
Adric.
Yeah. And it's like, you called me Adric. That would be you even called me this weird name. Jamie's not a weird name. He called you Susan. That's,
She even got called the Doctor's greatest enemy, who is
Yes.
Zodin. I love Zodin. You remember Zodin?
Have we met Zodin in the show?
No, we literally haven't. Zodin was never seen on screen, but he or she was first mentioned in the Five Doctors. Supposedly the Doctor's greatest enemy. Maybe Neil Patrick Harris is playing it?
That would be a
That's
deep
a
cut. That would be a deep... I mean, we pretty much think it's the toy maker he's playing, but Neil Patrick Harris playing Zodin, a villain they've only mentioned in the Five Doctors and this one episode, would be a real deep cut. I'm sure he's got a comic book or a Big Finish adventure out there.
Like the Doctor here literally says, they don't make villains like her anymore.
Yeah. So really lowers, but Doctor Who, gender is whatever. You could be a whatever.
Russell T Davies is bringing back Meep the Beep.
Yeah.
Well,
you say bringing back, introducing.
True.
To, allegedly from the set photos, it seems very likely, but we'll see.
What a time for Doctor Who, man.
Yeah. Then we get a really, really long scene, and then when this scene came up, I was like, now it's Doctor Who. Now it's classic Who, where the Doctor and Peri just walk about for, 2 minutes, just them walking down the street, turn around, walk back up the street, turn around, walk down the street again. While they're doing this, we see the 2 police officers are stalking them at one point in a fun camera pan. I thought that was nice. But it's like this, you do it for comedic effect, but for me, it just went on too long. And then the Doctor goes bombing down the street and makes Peri run and almost fall on her face. Like,
you know what it reminds me of? When I was in actual London, just looking at my phone, and the GPS was like, oh yeah, this thing is right here in front of you. This Weatherspoons is right here. And I'm like, I'm walking up and down the street being like, well, it's not here. Where is it?
I've never been to London, so never had that problem. never had that. Why don't you just
Well-
ask somebody? Why don't you just go, hello, kind sir? Can you point me to the local Weatherspoons?
Well, my experience in London was a lot better than this experience, I gotta say. You know?
Didn't run into any
Immediately-
Cybermen.
Yeah, and immediately being in the sewers.
We then cut to the guys in the sewers, where Davros is like, I think we're getting followed by some folk, and Lytton's like, shut up, don't worry about it. If we're getting followed, we'll deal with it. And it's a little bit of foreshadowing for, what's to come. The Doctor and that back at the scrapyard, they didn't really do, they left the scrapyard, walked around with a beeping thing, and then the Doctor went, oh, of course, and then they went back to the scrapyard. Like, they didn't need to be, it feels like a wasted scene for them to just leave, walk in a circle and come back.
Also, I got distracted earlier, but them being at the scrapyard just adds nothing to the storyline. Like, it's just a reference for a reference.
It's just a place where they can like make a they like doing references in this one, where with Peri listing off all the old companions and things like that, and even Lytonn coming back is a reference. But that Scrapyard's an easy place to show up the chameleon circuit because you can have it turn into anything. Whereas if you were like, oh, it's a lamppost, or if you did it in the street, it's just kind of a boring choice to make. Not that their choices were creative, but the Doctor and Peri are trying to be like, oh, let's go back into the TARDIS. How do we get back into the TARDIS? As the Doctor's kind of like fumbling around, and conveniently the door is on the back.
There was a great moment before that where the Doctor's just distracted by his sign looking at it, and Peri's trying to get his attention, so she starts jumping in the Doctor's eye line. I do love a little moment there. Although again, it's Peri jumping, so I imagine it was done on purpose.
Yeah, probably. And this is where the Doctor starts doing some sciencey stuff, where he's like, oh, we've got to relay bounce the signal and clear out the distortion, and it's a bunch of nonsense just to be like, we need to move where the TARDIS has landed to a different spot because we're in the wrong spot.
But also, he's like, oh yeah, we don't have any time. What if we move on?
Yeah.
Doctor, you have a fucking time machine.
Yeah, they're like, what if the alien leaves before we get to it? What if it leaves? And
Like, You could travel back in time to the moment where the alien placed that signal and find out who the alien is.
Yeah. Or it could be like a time loop, and maybe you're the one that placed the signal, and you're trying to save yourself, and then it could lead into all sorts of danger. But yeah, they kind of forget it's a time machine in this episode, don't they? It's just a space machine in this because I don't think they actually travel in time because it's set in current day, and they don't. They're worried that they're going to run out of time to save this alien. Like they forgot what the T in TARDIS stood for.
What does it stand for? Toilet?
I think so. Yeah. We then cut to our guys back in the sewer, and it's very dark. Slightly. It's not dark enough where you can't see what's going on, but it is convincingly dark, as you were saying earlier. And I don't remember they're doing anything interesting here. What actually happens in this scene?
Well, let's go watch it now.
Oh, man gets killed by Cyberman. So they're kind of fumbling around in the dark, and then a Cyberman hand, they get separated, and the Cyberman kills one of the dudes, and we get another POV shot of the Cyberman just to add a little bit of action in while nothing is happening as we're coming up to the halfway part through this episode.
And you're still supposed to be wondering, oh, I wonder who killed that guy.
Yeah, in this episode, Attack of the Cybermen. What could this episode be about? I'm just curious.
Could it be a Dalek?
Yeah. Well, Davros is in it. But we cut back to the Doctor, and they come out of the TARDIS again. This time it's a piano, or not a piano, it's an organ, sorry. And the Doctor plays the organ a little bit, and then we get the best moment in the soundtrack, where the soundtrack mimics the tune that the Doctor played. It's that classic, what's the name of the song?
I know Bach composed it, but I can't remember the name of the song.
Yeah, it was the... Yeah. The spooky one.
My beautiful rendition.
Yeah. Just as good as it is in the episode. But they go around exploring this shed. Hey, it's the shed from earlier, in case you didn't figure that out. And the Doctor kind of tricks Peri into thinking that he's going to fall into this big hole. He takes like a big step over the hole and then fixes himself at the last minute. It's a fun bit of physical comedy.
But the Doctor just really loves to gaslight people and just make them scared out of their fucking mind.
He doesn't like Peri. That's why he does not like Peri.
But he does the same thing to like Ace in Curse of Fenrir. He just does shit without consulting her.
Yeah. But as they're doing this, the Doctor's like distracted by a cupboard as Peri starts shouting for the Doctor, and then he eventually gives in, looks over, and we see a policeman in the hole with a gun pointed at Peri. The Doctor walks over and he's like, "Oh, hello, can I help you out of that hole?" And Peri's got the line where she's like, "He's got a gun, Doctor," and the Doctor goes, "Yes, I'm not blind." Just again being really mean.
In the script, it would make reference to Peri being an American and just being confused about guns in London. She'd be like, "Wait a minute, this isn't America. Why do you have guns?"
But the Doctor does his most classic, or his best John Pertwee impersonation, where he kicks the gun out of the police officer's hand and drops down to the hole to beat the crap out of him. It's extremely. I really don't like it when the Doctor just uses his fists to solve a problem, but it's a very classic Who solution, isn't it?
Or in this case, uses his foot.
Yeah, yeah. But while this is happening, the other police officer shows up and points a gun at Peri. Peri throws bricks in his eyes, like little bits of brick dust in his eyes, takes the gun, and that's basically the solution solved. The Doctor almost gets himself shot when he decides to be a funny guy and put the police helmet on as he comes up from the hole, and Peri's like, "That I was about to shoot you, Doctor. Don't ever do that again."
That would be a bold way to fire Colin Baker. Just
his first episode, he just gets shot by the companion. Like,
and then Sylvester McCoy is here now.
Yeah. Although, right, you know, the studio executives that pushed for it was because they wanted the show to change, and Colin Baker wasn't a popular Doctor, and having the companion kill the Doctor, where the companion is like the audience, you know, that's the stand-in for the audience. It's literally the audience killing the Doctor. That would have been funny. But the Doctor arrests this other police officer as the other one is knocked out, and they're like, "Oh, these guys aren't real police, are they?" And the Doctor's like, "Yes, no, let's climb into the sewer." And it feels like the police were just kind of wasted to this, you know, they just kind of walk about and then get beat up, you know. Yeah. I don't remember if they actually come back or not, but it's just kind of like they're there.
I don't think they do. They're just here because
they were in the other episode, and they were like, they walked away. We got to solve that storyline.
Yeah, and that policeman is an android, so, you know, he's still sitting there to this day, handcuffed to the table.
Yeah, where's that Big Finish story? We get back into the sewer with our guys, and we're back at the sewer from the start of the episode, where the guy's like, "Hey, that wall's not supposed to be there," and Lytton's like, "Don't worry about it. No, don't, you know, we're in the right place, definitely in the right place." And they have a bit of a spat before the Doctor and that walk into the sewers, and the Doctor's like, "This is a memorable trip for you because it stinks," and Peri's like, "Yep, I wish I was seeing London in a different light." We then go back to our guys. We're cutting about a lot now because the plot is slowly grinding its start engine. You know, it's starting to turn the key to turn it on. As our guys are standing in the sewer and they see something move in front of them, and then a Cyberman comes out of the shadows, and I don't know, I was shocked. I didn't expect Cybermen in this episode. And one of the guards shoots the Cyberman and nothing happens, and he shoots it again, and then green blood bursts out the Cyberman and he dies. And this is our first example of how pathetic the Cybermen are in this episode. Yeah. They are cannon fodder. They will die like it's nobody's business. Like, regular guns is enough to kill a Cyberman. Like, that to me was shocking.
Yeah, we all see it more later on, but yeah, it's just very weak Cybermen, and we make reference to this in the commentary of the show. Just the Cybermen are supposed to be very intimidating, but yeah, you can just use a gun against them, a few bullets.
Yeah,
it's perfectly fine.
It's like no big deal at all, barely an inconvenience.
Like later on, we'll go to Telos and we'll see a load of human workers imprisoned by the Cybermen. But it's so easy for them to get out of that situation as well. Yeah,
they get out of it like immediately. They're like, this sucks. We should leave. And the other guy's like, wait, we can leave? Like, you know, it's really dumb. But this is where Lytonn reveals that he is actually a bad guy, and he turns on his men and basically hands himself over to the Cybermen. He's like, "Oh, Cyberman, I surrender to you. You are now my captors. Take my gun." While the other guy gets killed by the Cybermen.
That shot of the wall opening, or just light, and you see the silhouette of a Cyberman is really fucking cool.
Yeah,
it's a great shot.
Yeah, it's really cool. What I'm struggling to understand, and maybe they explain it and I've just forgotten. What was Lynn's plan?
We'll find out. There's a whole subplot.
Okay.
Next episode that gets introduced.
Okay.
It's a big mess because you want to see in part 1, and
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of other subplots to
Awesome,
be introduced.
because it didn't make sense in part 1, because he wanted to steal diamonds, and then he's like, Cyberman, I surrender.
But he didn't actually want to steal diamonds. He just wanted to go into the sewer.
But did he need to bring like a whole crew of people to go into the sewer?
It's to convert them as a gift. I think he says it later on.
Okay. That's convoluted, isn't it?
You know, it's Eric Sayward. It's the same guy who wrote Resurrection of the Daleks.
Yeah, with
Just
the
a whole
like
load of
50
convoluted
subplots and
plots.
yeah.
What do you think of the Cybermen look, though? This is the first time we've seen the Cybermen.
Really like this look of the Cybermen, I think. They are... Their costumes, like their bodies, are still a bit too much guy in thin suit for me. I much prefer the modern Who version of Cybermen for that, specifically the David Tennant era, where they're big and blocky dudes. But I really like the helmet. I think the helmet looks thick and it looks metallic. Like, it looks really cool.
The helmet is literally the best part of these Cybermen, and it's even used the first time we see a Cyberman in the new series when we're in the Space Museum.
Yes.
But yeah, the head is fantastic. And the chest plate as well is great. Just the rest of the suit, just a guy in a suit. See it.
Yeah, but it's much better than the Cyberman we saw in Tomb of the Cybermen, where it's guy with the balaclava on his face.
Yeah,
like. So the Doctor and Peri are walking through some sewer tunnels towards the gunshot, where they find a dead man from Lytonn's crew, and the Doctor takes his gun, as the Doctor is wont to do. He loves having guns. Classic Who versions of the Doctor do anyway. I remember when I was a kid, and the Matt Smith episode Forest of the Angels, or whatever it's called specifically, is the one where he's underground with the loads of angels and Amy's turning into an angel. And the cliffhanger for that episode, or not the cliffhanger, but the next time of that episode showed Matt Smith firing a pistol. And I remember being like, Jesus Christ, the Doctor's using a gun. What is this nonsense? What is going on that the Doctor's using a gun? Little did I know that the Doctor loves using guns, and he uses them at every waking opportunity in Classic Who, Yeah,
that's a weird thing about New Who. The Doctor's always like, I would never use a gun, whereas in Classic Who, he uses a gun
constantly.
5 times a season.
And when he's not, but it's the same in New Who, where the Doctor's like, I don't use violence, I don't attack people. I use my words to deal with things peacefully. And you go to Classic Who, and he's just beating the crap out of everybody.
Yeah, cut back to the Sea Devils, where he's killing all the Sea Devils.
Yeah, throwing them into walls, and it's I much prefer the modern interpretation of the Doctor than the classic interpretation, though. I don't really like Violent Doctor too much.
I don't know. I don't mind Violent Doctor when he's fighting against the Cybermen. Just kill the Cybermen. I don't like when villains are left alive.
I guess, but I like the hardship that it puts into how do you deal with this situation without killing them, because killing them's easy. It's like the easiest solution to it possible. You have to use your brain to not kill them. You have to try and think of a way out of this.
From a writer's point of view in the 1980s, when you're not given much time to write
when you've got a week to do it,
yeah, you might as well just kill all the Cybermen with a big pistol,
Yeah. But anyway, they continue down, and we cut to the Cybermen chatting with Lytonn, and this is where we get a lot of exposition. We're coming into the exposition segment of the episode, otherwise known as the last 20 minutes before the cliffhanger, where the Cybermen are like, hey, we're Cybermen, and Lytton's like, that's cool, I'm Lytonn. I'm not a human, by the way, I'm from the planet Riften, and that was like, hey, that's from Skyrim, whereas you just didn't get it at all, because you are just this huge loser who doesn't know anything, whereas Skyrim is like a really famous place in the game, or not Skyrim, Riften is a very famous place in Skyrim.
Sure, yeah.
It's like the first city you go into in the game. You visit there a lot, you buy a house there if you want, you adopt some kids. It's a great game, Skyrim.
when we're in here with the Cyber Leader, who's played once again by David Banks from Earthshock, he is amazing. You said he sounds a bit like Darth Vader.
Yes, it does. It's this giant robot suit guy with a really deep voice, talking like slowly and commanding.
But I love these humanized kind of Cybermen voices. It's like obviously computerized at the same time, but it sounds more human than the new Cybermen.
It's been a while since we've seen. No, it's not. We saw Cybermen in the season finale. What am I talking about? I just don't remember what they sound like. Thinking in David Tennant's Cybermen, they sound super robotic, but because obviously I have to look through that with a nostalgic lens. That robotic voice is terrifying. The delete is absolutely terrifying. Whereas this is fine.
My problem with modern Cybermen is they're too robotic, and you forget that there's supposed to be a human underneath.
Yeah.
I think this episode forgets there's supposed to be a human underneath as well, because they just behead Cybermen.
That's kind of the point of the Cybermen, though, isn't it? That you're supposed to they're removed of humanity, and you're supposed to. And I mean, unless you really love your son more than anybody else, you get to not be a Cyberman.
My favorite interpretation of a Cyberman is literally the new Cyberman in Jodie Whittaker era, where the guy has half his face.
Yeah.
And you can see the human face underneath. I think that's really awesome.
I liked it in the David Tennant era where he undid the Cyberman chest bit, and it's just goo. It was this really gross goo. The imagine the Cybermen are just gooey.
But yeah, here for one of the first times we actually see humans being converted, which is wild that it took 22 seasons to show this on screen.
I mean, it's pretty... Doctor Who likes to toe the line between sci-fi and horror every now and then, but seeing people strapped up and getting turned into Cybermen is a pretty horror... it's pretty horror. And to try and get that past the censors, I'm sure it was a nightmare for a very long time.
We shall talk more next week about censorship and violence, and it's going to be a fun conversation.
Awesome. But while the Cybermen are talking, we find out that they're from Telos, or that they have people on Telos. We also find out there's Cybermen on the moon. And does that ever come back into play? The Cybermen on the moon?
We know about the Cybermen on the moon from previous episodes. You wouldn't, because you're... Doctor Who virgin, but
I'm not. But we do see the Cybermen on the moon in that Neil Gaiman episode that got chopped down into one episode he wasn't happy with. It's an okay episode. It could have been good.
Yeah, it could have been great.
Yeah.
But
we do visit Telos, and I have to say, as much as it is another quarry for Classic Who, I think it looks really good. I think the color palette is like blue and cold, and specifically the makeup on everyone to make them look dusty and sick. I think that looks very, very good as well.
We said this exact same thing in Tomb of the Cybermen, and you know why? Because it's the exact same location.
Is
as
it really?
Tomb of the Cybermen. It's
okay.
Jarrett's Cross in Hertfordshire. Yeah. And the camera was fitted with fog filters. It's a glass screen across the lens with a swirling mist pumped through it. And
that's clever. That's really clever.
Yeah, and the Cybermen was supposed to wear protective suits because apparently the air is poisonous on this planet, and they had prepared blue overalls with plastic bubble helmets, but they were like, oh shit, this looks really fucking stupid. Let's just not put this in.
Fair enough. You forget that Telos has a toxic atmosphere. It doesn't really. It's not important. Move past it. Just move past it. But then we get probably the dumbest action sequence I've ever seen, which is saying a lot because I've seen some dumb action sequences, but this one is really, really dumb. Where there's these heap of prisoners, and two of them decide they're going to fight back, and they start knocking Cybermen out left and right, because again, Cybermen are super weak in this. They knock one's head off, they just shove one over. One dude gets shot.
One of the Cybermen gets shoved over, and you just watch him in the background trying to get back like an old granny.
Yeah, one dude gets shot. While the other guy's screaming at one dude, he's like, grab the head. Even though he could run and grab the head, they're the same distance from it. He's like, grab the head, while the other guy's kind of frozen there, not knowing what to do. And they just both run away. The head gets destroyed.
And there's another Cyberman trying to shoot at them on top of a mountain. He misses them somehow.
Yeah, and it's really, really bad. It is just a really... It's so strange to be suddenly on an alien planet 3/4 of the way through this episode. Like, just randomly cut to Telos really caught me off guard. And to introduce these two new characters and to have this whole new subplot brought in, which, as you're saying, there's more subplots coming, so I can't wait.
Yeah. It feels like it could have been set up really early on, like a cold open kind of, even though they didn't do cold opens back in these days. But it could have been a cold open, it would be fine.
Yeah. But hey, here we are. Then we cut to the sewers with the Doctor and Peri, where they get held up with a gun by Davros. Where this is another really long scene of exposition where the Doctor is explaining the Dalek episode, who Lytonn is, and the police, not the police officer, Davros is explaining that he is a police officer and that they were trying to find out who Lytonn is, and he's been this really mysterious dude who came out of nowhere and he's trying to steal all this money. The scene goes on forever. It is such a long scene of exposition.
And if you like that, be prepared for next week, where there's even more exposition about previous episodes.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I suppose
there's nothing but exposition in the next episode.
I suppose, with how Doctor Who tapes were treated, they couldn't really do flashbacks, to show you just the clip.
Because, as I said, at the time, Tomb of the Cybermen was completely wiped out. 3 of the 4 episodes of the 10th Planet completely wiped out. They couldn't really show anything from that, and obviously videotapes weren't really around at this time, so people only knew these episodes from novelizations.
Yeah, or like vague memory from watching it on TV when they were a lot younger. Yeah. But we then cut back to Telos, where we have the two guys that escaped, full volume shouting at each other, which you were like, why is the Cyberman just not coming to get them? And it's like, they are deaf, because these guys are screaming at one another that they have just messed up their plan and they are now trapped on Telos because they need 3 people to fly the ship and they need the head, presumably to get past security or for some navigation purposes, and they have neither of those things, which, it's fun to see that they messed up, but they're just yelling.
But they've been preparing for this for a fortnight, apparently. And it went this badly.
Yeah. They did not prepare well, No. But yeah, it's real dumb. We then cut very briefly back to Lytonn and one of his goons, where Lytton's just like, you're a dumb idiot man, and that guy's like, hey, that was really mean, which is literally, that's what that scene is. It's so strange. And we're back on Telos. It's like these scenes are just there so that we can have a break between the Telos scenes, because we need some form of, like, the scenes would be too long on Telos, otherwise it's just a pacing thing. But on Telos we see that the other people aren't escaping and that they're just kind of working away, and maybe they should just go back. But the other guy's like, no, they're going to destroy the planet. Once they're done getting what they want, they're going to kill the planet with us on it. We're going to go attack Cyber HQ instead. And then we cut into Cyber HQ and we meet this version of the Cyber Leader.
The Cyber Leader is on Earth. This is the Cyber Controller.
Cyber Controller,
Going back just slightly, we'll talk about the Cyber Controller in a bit. The shot of them looking at the tomb up from the outside is pretty awesome, because it's a forced perspective, obviously. It's not CGI.
Yeah.
And so obviously the building is actually closer to the camera than the people, which is a really fun way to avoid CGI. I think more production should do something like that, because it's so creative and fun.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. The most creative thing for me is that mist lens. That sounds mental. I want one of those. That seems like it would save, 1, so much money, and 2, make you, like, if you want a mist scene, you no longer have to buy a fog machine. Stick this lens on, done. It's
perfect.
real clever.
Yes, this is the Cyber Controller, played by the same guy who from Tomb of the Cybermen, Michael Kilgareth. And he obviously gained a lot of weight since then, and you can see a very chubby Cyberman.
Yeah, it's just, he's got because the Cyber Controller is the brain one, which I think the Cyber Controller looked a lot better in Tomb of the Cyberman than it does here. This one's really boring, and he just kind of has Conehead. You remember, you ever see the film Coneheads? That's what he looks like. That if a Conehead was turned into a Cyberman. But maybe he's just extra large because his brain's his brain's all over. He's full of goo. He's full of brain goo.
I'm glad the costume tries to merge the two Cybermen, trying to go back to the Cyber Controller to make it more obvious. But at the same time, the Cyber Controller died at the end of Tomb of the Cybermen, so what is he doing here?
He rebuilt.
I guess maybe it's a new body and we just converted.
Yeah, they just
also the tomb, the actual tombs don't look as good as Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like this could have been cut down like 15 minutes.
You could have it. The Doctor shows up, or he's fiddling with the chameleon circuit. He goes to Earth. The guys are still setting up their stuff as usual. And then the Doctor doesn't need to do his whole running around the streets. He can just get led straight to the shed. And in the shed, he gets attacked by the police officers while those guys are down in the sewers. And you've already cut out about 20 minutes of the episode at that point. You know, it's like you have half an episode here, really.
Yeah, it still feels like we're just trying to gently go across to the cliffhanger. We're still building up to the cliffhanger.
Yeah. But we cut to the Doctor and that walking through the tunnels, and they're like, Peri's like, where are we going? And the Doctor's like, oh, we're going back to the TARDIS. I am done. Like, he's just wanting to go home. And meanwhile, we cut to the Cyberman with Lytonn and the Goon, and what are they talking about? Oh, he's just chatting. The Cyberman's just chatting about how they want to be strong and powerful. It's a nothing scene. You know.
I'll tell you, I zoned out at the exact same moment. He's
just monologuing about nothing. Like, and then we cut back to Talos, where our two guys are running around, and they're like, we need to get another Cyberman head. You know, they climb up this thing, and we find out that the Cybermen have sent out another Cyberman to go collect them because they've been caught on the scanners. And then this Cyberman just gets beat up by the two guys really easily. He gets knocked over. There's a moment when he's about to die where he gets knocked over, and then he stands up, and he just stands there. Jesus. There's a moment where he gets knocked over and he stands up, and he just stands there for like 5 seconds while the guy lines up his shot to hit him across the back of the head. It's really dumb, but he knocks off the head. And then he has this other dumb line where the guy's like, why didn't you let me use the gun? And he's like, oh, you could have damaged the head. And it's like, you just hit the head with a metal pipe. You're damaging the head. What are you on about?
There's no consistency here, and also I do love a little bit where he's standing on top of the little hill and he's just like, "Hello, are you looking for me?"
Yeah, he's doing some banter. I also think the effect of the head getting knocked off does look cool. You know, there's sparks and explosions. It's a very good practical effect. And we also find out that they want the Cyberman head so that the other guy he's gonna take presumably the human head out of it and wear it as his own little helmet to sneak in, and they're going to do like a stormtrooper leading Chewbacca through the Death Star type plan, which is an interesting choice to make.
If you remember there's a head in there, it kind of comes across as if they don't remember there's supposed to be a head in there. But
yeah. Although, you know, going and like saying, okay, remove the head from here and stick your own head in it, maybe it's just a bit too violent imagery to. I
would love it for.
To see a decapitated head, like
But yeah, one thing about the mist filter we applied over the camera, it doesn't move as the camera moves, which is kind of obvious to me now watching this back. But at the same time, it's still
a really good cheap effect, though. Yeah. And then the cyber brain dude, whatever he's called, Gavin. He's like got this really redundant sentence where he's like, "We need to catch those guys before they get into the base," and it's like, yeah, that is what you have to do. You're right.
One thing about the cyber controller and the cyber leader, I don't understand. Who's at the top of the hierarchy? Does this cyber controller control the cyber leader, or does the cyber
partners.
Leader?
They're lovers. They're lovers. They're partners. They do everything together. You know.
Because like I always just assumed they're one and the same. But
I assume that cyber leader. He's the one with Lytonn, isn't he?
Yeah.
So my guess is like cyber leader is like
Cider leader?
Cider leader is like the commander or something. You know, he's leading the army, whereas the cyber brain, what's his name?
Cyber controller.
Cyber controller controls, like he's in charge of the Cybermen in general because he controls them, or maybe like he controls domestic Cybermen, like they're on Talos doing mining and he's in charge of that aspect, while Cyber Commander's controlling the army side where they go out and attack planets. You know, maybe they have like this divulge system.
Maybe
They've never really explored it, you know.
No.
Like,
they should.
they should. It would be interesting, you know. But it's the same with the Daleks. Who's in charge of the Daleks? Is it Davros? Is the Dalek Emperor? Is it like the Council of Daleks? Is it the Cult of Skaro? Who's in charge? Like,
Definitely not Davros. It feels like it's the Emperor, but even though he's only been seen on screen like twice.
yeah.
Not really.
It feels like sometimes it's Davros. Like sometimes he's in charge of the Daleks, and sometimes the Emperor's in charge. Sometimes the Emperor's in charge, and they let Davros think he's in charge, but really he's not.
The canon in this show and the continuity is like all over the place. It varies from season to season, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From writer to writer.
Just don't worry about it.
I'll explain later.
Yeah. Then we get the shot that made me go, Jesus Christ, we're at the end of this episode and the Doctor is just meeting the Cybermen. You know, we've had the Cybermen on screen for about 15 minutes and the Doctor is just being like, oh my god, there's Cybermen in this episode, when he sees one standing down the hall, and then he explains to Peri who Cybermen are. And it's like, oh, Jesus, you know, I feel like you missed a step having him not see the Cybermen until right now.
Yeah, it feels more like a end of Act 2 kind of thing in this episode. And the last 15 minutes is, oh yeah, shit, if Cybermen are here, I have to figure something out. But no.
Yeah, and then he stabs the Cyberman to death with, is it his sonic screwdriver? He describes it as a sonic lance when he gets taken, but I took that as a joke.
Definitely not his sonic screwdriver. His sonic screwdriver got destroyed like 2 seasons before this.
Okay.
It's a similar device, I guess.
Sonic device. Yeah, where he stabs the Cyberman through the heart and it explodes. And a really cool effect. But it's just, you know, it's like, how do we deal with this problem? Stab it.
Does he leave the thing inside this Cyberman?
Yeah.
Does he not?
Yeah.
I think he take it out.
I don't remember him taking it out because he stabs it and then it falls down and you still see the thing like flashing and then it goes like boom. I hit my mic.
Did the device get destroyed or? Is the device still in there?
I would assume I assume if the Cyberman exploded, the device exploded with it. That would be
fair. That's a good headcanon, because otherwise, why not just take it out and just use it
on every Cyberman? Just keep stabbing. Yeah. No, I assume it exploded.
Not that the Cybermen are hard to destroy without it, though.
Yeah, true. You just shoot them with a regular gun. Then we cut back to Cyber Commander and Lytonn, where Cyber Commander's saying a bunch more nonsense, and the goon that's still there, why is he not getting turned into a Cyberman? Why is he still just allowed to stand there? Starts making fun of Cyber Commander for some reason, and Cyber Commander just squeezes his head. Like,
you're asking why he's still here. He was actually going to die in the first draft of his script, but the writer was just like, hey, I like this character. I want to keep him on. And he does nothing in the next episode.
Yeah, that's so dumb. That's so dumb. But then they decide, or we cut to the Doctor and that as they're about to leave the sewer, and we cut back and Lytonn and the Commander are talking about the Doctor, because they figure out that the Doctor's there, and the Cyber Commander is like awesome, or Cyber Commander is like awesome.
Cyber leader.
Sure, I don't know. They're the same person. You know, he's like, awesome. I love the Doctor. You know the Doctor, Lytonn? And Lytton's like, yeah, I know the Doctor. And the Cyberman's like, awesome, let's go to his TARDIS and just like steal it. And then we get, you know, we cut to the Doctor coming into the TARDIS and getting attacked by the Cyberman. And it brings up so many questions for me.
Yeah.
First question.
Oh, yeah.
How did they get out the sewer before the Doctor did?
A wizard did it.
Okay. Second question. How did they get inside the TARDIS?
Yes, that's a big problem. Like, the TARDIS is supposed to be
sealed.
It's supposed to be sealed. You're not supposed to get into it. It's never explained.
Yeah, they're just there. They're just all there. Like, literally all of them are there. The Cyber Commander / leader, the goon is even in the TARDIS. Like, just everybody is inside the TARDIS suddenly. It just comes out of nowhere. But they start killing off the Cybermen until they get overwhelmed, and we get and I counted them 6 no's back to back in a very funny sequence. Particularly funny when Davros goes no, and then Peri goes no, and then Davros goes no. It could be the other way around, where Peri goes no, Davros says no, then she says no again. It's no, 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 and then she gets surrounded by Cybermen. She's gonna die. The Doctor's like being held captive, and then we cut to the credits. That's our cliffhanger. This time the Doctor's not gonna die. Peri's gonna die, which was an interesting twist on the cliffhanger. But most hilariously, when we cut to these to the credits, we've had this tragic scene, this gut-wrenching, oh my god, edge of our seat, is our companion gonna survive this? We cut to Colin Baker's happy face as the credits roll by. He's just a lovely, happy dude. Like, it's the biggest juxtaposition I've ever seen.
Yeah, it seems like a good idea having the Doctor's face at the end credits, but you gotta think about what precedes that face,
I know, it's so...
Peri almost dying, the Doctor smiles.
Which, to be fair, could be an accurate a reaction that he would have to the Peri dying. But also, this is the last time we see our good old friend Russell, played by Davros, in this episode. Because he gets killed, didn't he?
And in the next episode, he's magically gone because the BBC didn't want to pay him for another episode.
Famous disintegrating body.
And so Terry Malloy in the commentary just like, oh yeah, the TARDIS magically disappears me. And it's just magic.
He's part of the TARDIS now. Interesting. But that is the end of part 1 of this episode of Attack of the Cybermen. What did you think, Scott, of part 1?
It's a decent season opener. I'd be happy watching this in 1985. It's not great. I think it's a lot better in part 2, that's for sure. But we haven't got up to part 2 yet. But this is like a 7 out of 10 episode, I would say. It's fine, just nothing happens.
Yeah. I think I'd say as well. I think it's really good. I feel like it's really strong character stuff for the first half. Like, because you're introducing, well, to me anyway, who Colin Baker's Doctor is. And maybe to a wider people who maybe missed the last few episodes of last season, who never saw it, you're introducing what this Doctor's like. And while he's not exactly likable, he's kind of funny and weird in a way that we've not seen before. And then the second half really just kind of drops the ball for me, where it starts introducing storylines I don't care about, the pacing becomes weird, and then nothing happens. It is 40 minutes of, like, 2 things happening.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see what part 2 does for me. But yeah, I think 6.5, maybe less than that. 6.5 out of 10. We don't usually give numbers. It's like, I think we've given numbers like 2 or 3 other times. We normally just say our piece and go. But yeah, it's a solid, fine episode with nothing too spectacular. The chameleon circuit's fun. I like,
the chameleon circuit's fun, but it goes to nowhere. I like Colin Baker as the Doctor. He's a great Doctor. I really like Lytonn, but we'll talk about him more next episode. They really didn't know what to do with him. He's a great actor. He's like a leading. He comes across as a leading man, but they do absolutely shit all with him, which is a shame. But yeah, it's a good episode overall. It's just not great.
In the meantime, while you wait for next week for Attack of the Cybermen Part 2, you can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on Twitter at Watches Doctor, me on Twitter at Cloth223, and you can send us an email with your thoughts on Attack of the Cybermen at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com. That's whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com, and we will read it out at the end of the month at our monthly news roundup episode. Next week, obviously, as I said, Attack of the Cybermen Part 2. And then after that, Scott, what have we got coming up?
We are doing the Human Nature 2-parter, Family Blood and Human Nature, and we're very excited to go back to that because, from what I remember, it's a brilliant episode. It's probably one of the best 2-parters of the modern series.
Yes, it's absolutely brilliant, and really dark for David Tennant's Doctor. But next week, Attack Part 2, then Family of Blood. Until then, bye-bye.